Ask her name, you great coward. That was the first thing my wolf ever said that another living soul heard back. We were in the low kitchen at Hyboro, though a king has no business in his own kitchens at dawn, and I knew it, and I had gone down anyway on the thin excuse of the hounds. Steam stood in the rafters. The long fires had been banked in the night and were being woken now, the boys blowing the coals red, and the whole low room smelled of barley and wet ash and the particular sweetness of dough left to rise. 24 folk moved through that smell in the gray light, and none of them looked at me twice, because at that hour I was only a big man in a plain cloak leaning in a doorway where he was not wanted. Bracken, that is my wolf, and has been since I was a boy, the gray old voice that lives under my breastbone. Bracken had been at me for the better part of a season. He is not a separate creature, you must understand. He is the part of me that does not lie, the honest animal beneath the ruled man, and he speaks in my chest the way weather speaks in an old wound. Most men carry their wolf silent. Mine has never in his life been silent. And that morning he was saying again, pleased with himself there. The one with flour to her wrists. Ask her name, you great coward. I ignored him, as I had ignored him 100 mornings, because a king does not learn the names of scullery girls to please the beast in his chest. And 3 tables down, the girl with flour to her wrists dropped her ladle. It rang on the stone. She did not startle the way a clumsy hand startles, a jump, a gasp, an apology already on the lips. She went still. A particular stillness, the stillness of someone who has heard a thing said in a quiet room and is deciding very carefully not to have heard it. Her ears had gone pink at the tops. She bent, unhurried, and picked the ladle up and did not look at me. I am not a man who is often surprised. It is a discipline, and I have kept it a long time. My father surprised me twice in my life, once by living longer than the healers swore he would, and once by dying in an afternoon when we all thought we had a winter left. And between those 2 mornings I taught myself that surprise is a door left open, and that a king who leaves doors open loses holds. So I had spent 30 years learning to keep my doors shut. But something cold and bright went down my arms then, and Bracken, who is never quiet, went so quiet I could have heard a candle gutter across the room. Torin, he said low, all his pleasure gone. Did she? I did not answer him. I watched the girl. She wiped the ladle on her apron and went back to the pot as though nothing at all had happened, and every line of her small, straight back was the line of a person pretending very hard to be deaf. I have interrogated men. I have watched liars work in my own hall and known them by exactly this, not the flinch, which anyone can master, but the too perfect calm that comes after the flinch, the calm laid down like a cloth over something that must not be seen. She had heard him. She was hiding that she had heard him, and she was good at the hiding, practiced at it, which meant it was not the first time. You, I said. The kitchen did not stop exactly, but it thinned, the way a wood thins when a hawk crosses it, the small movements going careful, the talk dropping, everyone finding sudden business with their hands. The head cook, a broad woman named Mab who had fed 3 generations of my house and feared none of them, turned with a spoon in her fist. My lord, she said, and then, because she was Mab and a king in her kitchen at dawn could only mean complaint. If it's about the pastries, the fault was the ovens and not the girl, and I've said as much to the steward twice. It is not about the pastries. I had not taken my eyes from the flour-dusted one. You, what is your name? She straightened and turned. She was younger than I'd thought and older than she looked. In that way tired people are, a plain brown plate coming loose at the temple, a face that would pass unremembered in any crowd until you saw the eyes, which were the gray of weather coming over the moor, and were not the least bit afraid. She met my look the way you meet a horse you are not sure of, steady, not challenging, weight already shifted to step aside if she must. Nell, my lord, she said. Her voice was low and level and gave nothing away. Just Nell, I mind the low pots in the kennels. Just Nell, I said, and then to prove the thing to myself, because I could not believe it and had to, I did a cruel small thing I am not proud of. I thought at my wolf, deliberately aiming the words the way you aim a stone across water. Ask her again, wolf, ask her if she heard you. And Bracken, catching on, said aloud in the dark of me, gently, Nell, did you hear me, Nell? She flinched, the smallest flinch, a flinch at the very edges of her, gone before it had finished being a flinch. And then the too perfect calm came down over it like the cloth, and she said evenly, Was there something you wanted, my lord? The barley's near to catching. But I had seen it. I knew, the way you know a thing before you have any right to know it, that she had heard him say her name inside my chest, in a voice no throat had made, and had answered me instead so I would not know she'd heard. The floor of me dropped, the way it drops when you set your foot on a stair that isn't there and your whole body lurches for a step the world has not provided. I had governed the North for 11 years. I had held the Kelder border through the worst winter in living memory, and buried a father, and refused, one after another, every match my council put before me, because none of the fine, grave women they brought had ever once made me feel anything but the weight of the crown. In all that time I had kept one thing entirely and only my own, the voice of my wolf. My griefs I ruled, my temper I ruled, my face, above all, I ruled. The North needs a king whose face gives nothing and mine gives nothing. But Bracken said whatever he pleased in the dark of me, my one unruled country, and it had never once mattered because no living soul could hear him. A living soul could hear him. "Carry on," I said to the kitchen in the voice that ends conversations, and I turned and went up out of the warm dark into the gray morning with my heart going like a hunted thing, and Bracken saying, over and over, delighted and appalled in equal measure, "She heard me, O Torin, she has heard everything." That was the trouble, that was the whole of the trouble. She had heard everything. You must understand what everything was, or none of the rest will weigh right. A wolf does not lie, and mine least of all. Bracken is the part of me I do not permit out of doors. When the council wearied me, he said so, in words I would never let past my teeth. When a petition moved me and I kept my face like stone, he wept the tears I would not. When I was afraid, and a king is afraid far more than he can ever show, afraid of the flood road and the failing harvest and the border and the long cold future of a house with no heir, he named each fear plainly and without shame, because shame is a human invention and he has no use for it. He was my confessor and my only confidant, and the whole safety of it, the thing that let me bear being king, was that his voice went nowhere. I could think the unthinkable in his mouth and it stayed in my chest. And for a whole turning season, since a wet spring evening I will tell you about in a moment, Bracken had talked of very little but her. The evening it began, I had come in soaked from the kennels, having spent the gray afternoon with a bitch that had whelped too early in the cold, 4 pups, and the smallest of them not breathing right. A wet scrap of a thing I had already, privately, grieved, because I have kept enough dogs to know which ones the morning takes. I gave it to a kennel girl with instructions to keep it warm and no real hope, and I went into my accounts. And near midnight, restless, I went back down to see it decently buried before the frost, and found it not buried at all. I found it in the low kitchen, in a girl's lap by the banked fire. She had it wrapped in a cloth against her own body, and she was doing something I had never seen, not warming it merely, but breathing with it, matching her slow breath to its quick one, and then drawing her slower and slower, coaxing the little ragged breath down into her rhythm, the way you gentle a panicked horse by making yourself calm beside it until it borrows your calm. And she was singing very low, a tuneless thread of a thing with no words I knew, and the pup that the morning was meant to take, was breathing. Slow, even, alive. She had not seen me in the dark of the doorway. I watched a while. Then I went up, and I did not thank her, because it was not a king's place to thank a scullery girl for a dog, and I told myself that firmly on the stairs, and by the time I reached my rooms, Bracken had already begun. She has good hands, he said that first night, while I lay awake pretending I was thinking of grain stores. The pup lives because of her hands. Go and thank her. I did not go. It was not a king's place. You are a fool, he said, comfortably, and went asleep. After that it was every few days, and then most days. She sings to the old blind hound so will take his food, he told me. Did you know that? He won't eat unless she sings. I had not known that. She gave her bread to the boy who mucks the runs and told him she wasn't hungry, and she was hungry, Torin. I could hear her stomach from the wall. I had told him to stop noticing. He had not stopped. When you rode out to the Kelder border, she stood at the yard wall and watched the road until you were gone over the hill, and I don't think she knows why she did it, and I don't think you know why it pleases you that she did. I had told him sharply that he was to leave off, that I would not have a maid spoken of so, that it was beneath us both. And Bracken, who fears nothing, least of all me, had said, in the gentlest voice he owns, Torin, you go down to the kitchens at dawn 3 mornings out of 5 and stand in that doorway and pretend it is the hound's. I am not the one who began this. I only say aloud the things you will not. And she had heard it. That was what I understood, standing in the gray yard with my heart going. She had heard all of it, season on season of it. Somewhere below me, in a cot off the kitchens, A small brown woman thought a fool by everyone who fed beside her knew that the king of the north watched for her at a doorway, and pretended it was the hounds. Knew it not by guessing, not by a maid's hopeful reading of a great man's glance, but flatly, certainly, in my own wolf's plain words, because my one unruled country had been speaking itself aloud to her for a season while I believed myself the most guarded man alive. I did not sleep that night. It is not so bad, Bracken offered toward dawn. You told her I watch for her, I said aloud to the dark. You do watch for her. That is not the point. It is precisely the point, said my wolf, and would say no more. I did not go down to the kitchens for 4 days. I am not proud of it, and I will not dress it up. I told myself it was the accounts, and the delegation from the river holds, and the matter of the flooded low road that carried half our winter trade, all of which were true, and none of which needed me the way I pretended they did. A king can always find a border to stand at when he does not wish to cross a kitchen. On the 5th morning my steward came to me, and I will tell you about Ansel, because you cannot understand what it cost either of us later if you think him a villain, and he was not. Ansel was dry as a reed and twice as tough, a narrow gray man who had served my father before me and considered it his sacred and personal duty to see me wed to someone with a name before he died. He did not want power by it. He was long past wanting things for himself. He wanted the house to stand. He had watched my father's house nearly fall for want of an heir and a strong alliance, and he had decided, somewhere in his flinty soul, that he would not watch it happen twice, and so he brought me women. Grave, clever women of good blood, one a year, like a man bringing seed to a field he is determined will not lie fallow. And I had refused everyone, and he had borne each refusal like a small personal grief and come back the next year with another name. He came in that 5th morning with a letter and a look. The Lady Syrian of Ashcombe will come at the harvest moot, he said without preamble, laying the letter on my table as though it were a winning stone in a game we had played too long. Her father is agreeable, more than agreeable. He has wanted this 10 years. She is, by every account, I trust, and I trust few, gracious and clever, and she has read more books than you have, my lord, which I say as a kindness and a warning both. He allowed himself the ghost of satisfaction. Ansel enjoyed my faults. It was one of his few pleasures. It is a good match. It is the best match that has ever been on this table. It is past time, and it is more than past time, and I will say the thing I have not said in 11 years of bringing you women. I am getting old, and I should like to see the North safe before I go, and this is how it is made safe. Do not refuse this one out of habit. It is a good match, I said, because it was and meant nothing by it. And Ansel, who had served me long enough to hear the nothing, narrowed his eyes and said, There is something in your voice this week I do not like and cannot name, and gathered his letter, and went, and I sat a long time not reading the accounts I had claimed for 4 days needed me. That evening I went to the wolf yard. The wolf yard at Hyborough is the one place in all my hold I am let alone. The great gray pack keeps there, real wolves, not the hounds, the true gray ones that have run with my line since before the hold had a name, kept not caged but kept, coming and going through the wall gaps as they please and returning always at dusk. They are half the reason the North calls my house what it does. At evening they come to the low wall for me the way they always have, since I was a boy small enough to sit between the old bitch's paws, and I put my hands in their ruffs and let the day fall off me, and I say nothing, and they say nothing, and it is the only silence I own. Only that evening it was not silent, because Nell was there. She was at the far end with the blind hound, the old one Bracken had spoken of, coaxing food into him with her low, tuneless singing, and she had not seen me, or had not let me see that she had seen me. I could no longer tell which with her, and that not being able to tell was already becoming the most interesting thing in my days. The grown pup was at her knee, the drowned one, leggy now and foolish with adoration, leaning its whole weight against her the way young things do when they have decided a person is safe. I stood very still in the blue dark, and did the thing I had told myself for 4 days I would not do. Well, I thought at my wolf, deliberately aiming it. Is she as kind as you have made her out all season, or have you made a poem of a plain girl to torment me? At the far wall, Nell's hands went still on the hound's ears. She is kinder than I have made her, said Bracken, unhurried, and you have known it since the spring, and you are a coward, and I love you. And I watched her hear it. I watched the corner of her mouth move, not a smile, she caught it before it was a smile, She was always catching it, my Nell, hiding her smiles the way a poor woman hides bread but the ghost of where a smile would have been. And I understood, standing there like a boy who has never held a boarder in his life, three things at once. The first was that it was true. She could hear him. There was no more doubting it, no more testing it. The thing was simply so, and my one guarded country had a listener at its wall. The second was that she had just plainly been called kind by a wolf in front of a king, and had been amused, and had hidden it, and that this was the single most interesting thing that had happened to me in 11 years of wearing the crown, and that I had not felt this awake since I was a young man who still believed things could surprise him. The third I did not have words for, only Bracken had them, and he said them for me very softly, the way he says the things I cannot. "Oh," he said, "there you are. There is the face I have been waiting a season to see. Look at you, you didn't know it was still in there." Nell rose, she gathered the hound's empty bowl. "And then I will remember this until I am a very old man by a fire. And I nearly am." She turned, and looked straight across the whole length of the yard at me, and said, out loud in her level, low voice, the first words she ever chose to say to me rather than merely answer. "You could tell him to hush, you know, if you wanted." "I have tried," I said, and my own voice came out rough, unruled, another door swinging open. "For 30 years he does not hush." "No," she agreed. She looked at me a moment longer, weather gray and steady. "The good ones don't." And she carried the bowl away into the dark and left me standing there with my heart going and my wolf, for once in his long, noisy life, entirely silent, and pleased I could feel it, pleased past all bearing. After that we could not go back, and I no longer wished to. I will not pretend I courted her cleverly. I am not a clever man in that country. I can hold a border and read a ledger, and I could not, to save the North, cross a kitchen and simply speak to a woman like an ordinary man. So Bracken did it for me, as he had been doing all along, only now with an audience of one who could hear every word. And the difference, the whole delicious difference, was that now he did it on purpose, the old schemer, and knew he was heard, and enjoyed himself beyond anything I had felt from him in years. It became our evenings. I would come to the yard at dusk on the excuse of the pack. She would be there with the blind hound or the foolish pup, and she would not look up when I came, because looking up would have been admitting the whole of it, and neither of us was ready yet to admit the whole of it. And Bracken, unhurried, comfortable, would begin. "Tell her the gray bitch whelped again and both pups live." He'd say, "She'll want to know. She's been watching that bitch's belly for a fortnight." And Nell, not looking up, would say, "Both of them? Good," to the hound in her lap, as though the thought had risen in her own head. "Tell her you rode the flood road today and it held past the ford," he'd say. "She watched the road again this morning, I saw her. She'll have been carrying it all day." And Nell's hands would still briefly on the hound's ears, and she would say nothing, and the not saying was a fuller answer than any word. "Tell her," he said one evening, when the first hard cold had come down and she had wrapped the shivering pup in her own shawl and gone without, standing thin-armed in the frost so a dog could be warm, that she is not to give her warmth away to every creature in this yard and keep none back for herself. Tell her it troubles someone. Tell her someone would very much like her to be warm. That one she did not hide. She looked up. Across the frozen yard in the falling dark, she looked at me with her weather eyes, and I could not have said a word to save my crown, and Bracken said, quietly, only to the two of us, only inside my chest, which was no longer only mine, "He means himself. He always means himself. He has simply never once in his life learned how to say so." "I know he does," said Nell. And that was more than 11 years of counsel had ever taught me about the man I was. It could not stay a secret in a house like mine, and it did not. Mab worked it out first, because Mab worked everything out first, and had done since before I could reach the kitchen table. She caught me in the low passage one gray morning and planted herself square in the middle of it, spoon and all, and said without preamble, "You'll not toy with her." "I do not toy," I said. "She's had toying enough for one life," said Mab, unmoved by kings, having buttered too many of us as babies to fear the grown article. "You want to know what she was before she was mine? She was a foundling of the Moor Holds, left listener-touched and strange, and every house she was set to thought her simple and turned her out, one after another, because she'd go still in the middle of a task and listen to nothing, and folk don't like what they can't name. By the time she came to me, she'd stopped talking almost altogether, because talking had never once got her anything but the door. I taught her the low pots, and I taught her that in my kitchen a body could be as strange as it pleased so long as the barley didn't catch, and it took the better part of a year before she'd sing where I could hear her. Now, she leveled the spoon at me like a blade. The others still think her simple. I've let them because thinking her simple keeps them from thinking about her at all, and a girl who's turned out of 6 houses learns that being overlooked is the next best thing to being safe. If you go and make the whole hold look at her, and then you toy with her, my lord, you will not just break her heart. You will take the one safe thing a much-turned-out woman ever learned to build, and you will do it in front of everyone. So I will ask you plainly, king or no. What are you about? I was quiet a moment. Then I told her the truth, because Mab had earned it and no one else had ever asked me the question plainly. I am not about anything yet, Mab, because I do not know how, I said, but I will tell you what she is since you have told me. She is not simple. She hears the wolf voice, mine. She has heard it since the spring, and I only learned it a fortnight ago. Mab's face did not change, which told me she had guessed most of it. There is an old word for it. My grandmother's grandmother spoke of them when I was a boy, the listeners, the ones born to hear the gray speech, and it was said the line had gone out of the world 3 generations back, that the last of them died in the plague years. It has not gone out of the world. It has been minding your low pots, being turned out of more holds by folk too dull to know a marvel when it sang to their sick dog. Mab was quiet a long time. The steam moved in the passage. Then she said gruffly, well, that explains the pastries, which made no sense at all, and stumped off, and I heard her all that day being unaccountably, ferociously kind to the very kitchen girls who had called Nell a fool, in the roundabout way of good hard people who cannot say sorry and so simply behave better and make everyone around them behave better too, and dare anyone to ask why. But Ansel worked it out as well, and Ansel did not deal in kindness where the house was concerned. Ansel came to me 3 evenings later with the flat gray face of a man who has counted the cost of a thing to the last coin, and found the sum too high to bear. They are saying, he said, that the king has taken a fancy to a scullery girl who talks to herself in the kennels. She does not talk to herself. I know what she does, and there was no cruelty in it, which was worse than cruelty because I could not be angry at it. I have made it my business to know, my lord, since it has become my business. She is a listener. I did not think to see one in my lifetime. My own grandmother swore they were real, and I thought her a fond old woman. It is a marvel. I grant it freely, it is a true marvel, and a great one. He set his hands flat on my table, the way he did when he meant to say the whole of a hard thing. But hear me, because I am the only man in this hold who will say the cold of it to your face, and I say it as your servant and not your enemy. A marvel is not a Luna. The North does not kneel to a marvel. It kneels to a name and an alliance and a woman who can stand in the great hall at the harvest moot with the river lords and the moor lords staring and not be swallowed whole by the room. Lady Syrian can. You know she can. You have read her letters. This girl, this good, strange, turned-out girl, cannot. It is no fault in her. It is only the truth. Choose the marvel, my lord, and you will spend your whole reign defending her from 100 small cruelties you cannot be everywhere to stop. Choose the name, and you spend it ruling, and the house stands, and I die easy. That is the whole of the matter. I am sorry it is so hard, and I am sorry it falls to me to say it, and I would not say it if I did not love your house more than my own comfort. And the worst of it, the thing that kept me awake that night with the first true frost cracking down on Hyborough, was that I could not find the place where he was wrong. He is not wrong, Bracken said, softly in the dark, and that frightened me more than anything Ansel had said, because Bracken is never on Ansel's side, and if my honest wolf granted the cold reckoning even a corner, then perhaps the reckoning was simply true. Then what would you have me do? I said to the ceiling. I would have you stop asking me, said my wolf, and there was something in his voice I had not heard before, something almost stern. I have carried you across every hard yard of this a whole season because you would not walk it yourself. I told her you were kind. I told her you watched for her. I said aloud every soft thing you kept behind your teeth, and I did it gladly. But this last piece I cannot do for you, Torin, and I will not, because it would be worth nothing if I did. She has heard my heart all season. She has never once heard yours in your own voice. If you want her and you want her, I have felt it grow in you since the spring like a second pulse. Then you will cross the room yourself on your own 2 feet, and you will say it with your own mouth, and you will let her choose in the full cold light of what it costs. Or you will let her go cleanly and not torment her with a doorway you watch and will not walk through. Those are the only 2 honest roads. Pick one. I lay a long time in the dark. Then I said, You have never once refused me anything." "I am refusing you this," said Bracken gently, "because I love her too. Go to sleep. You have a room to cross in the morning, and you have never crossed a harder one, and you will want your rest." She had heard it, of course. She heard everything I should have known. I found her the next dusk in the wolf yard, and I knew the moment I saw her face that Ansel's cold reckoning had reached her through my own chest in the night. Every word of it. The marvel and the name and the defending and the small cruelties I could not be everywhere to stop, because she was not still and half-listening as she always was. She was braced. She had the look of a person who has decided something sad in the small hours and has made her whole peace with it, folded it away neat, and means to be gentle about it, and it went through me worse than any wound I have taken in the field. "My lord," she said, and rose, and it was my lord again, the wall gone all the way back up, and I hated the sound of it in her level mouth. "Nell, you should marry the lady from Ashcombe." She said it plainly, kindly, the way she said everything, and it was the cruelest kind thing anyone has ever done to me, because I could hear how much it cost her and how carefully she had decided it was right. "She reads more than you do. Your wolf said so one morning. He was laughing about it. Your wolf tells me everything, my lord. You know that by now he can't help it, and neither can I, and so I know the rest of it too. I heard your steward in your chest last night, near the whole of it, the marvel and the name, and how you'd spend your whole reign standing between me and 100 small unkindnesses. And I heard you not find where he was wrong." A very small, very tired smile quickly caught. "I've been turned out of 6 houses, my lord, for being strange. I know the shape of a thing that won't hold before it's said aloud. This won't hold. And I'd rather be the one to say it and keep my low pots than watch you spend a year learning your steward was right and then say it yourself. So, marry the name, it's the sense of it. I'll not think worse of you. I'll not think of you much at all if I can manage it, which I likely can't, but I'll try." I did not say she was a marvel and not a Luna, Bracken growled, wounded. That was the steward. I said the North might have to learn her, and learning is not the same as... "Hush," I told him aloud, and he did. For the first time in 30 years, at the one moment in my whole life it mattered most, my wolf hushed and left the yard to me. And I stood in the cold with the gray pack ranged silent along the wall and the foolish drowned pup leaning against her knee. And I understood all at once and completely that I had let a wolf do my speaking for a whole season because I was a coward, not a battlefield coward. I have never been that. But the other kind, the deeper kind, the kind that has ruled his own heart so long and so hard that he no longer knows how to let it out of doors and is afraid, bone afraid, of what his own plain voice might sound like saying a true thing with nothing to hide behind. And I understood that the wolf could not do this last piece, that no creature in the world could do it but me, in my own unpracticed voice, standing on my own 2 feet, with nothing between us at all. So I crossed the room. I crossed the whole cold length of the wolf yard, which was the hardest ground I have ever covered, harder than the Kelder ice, harder than my father's grave, and I stood in front of her close enough to see the frost catch in the loose hair at her temple. And I said it myself with my own mouth, in the voice I had ruled for 30 years and now let go. "He has spoken for me all season," I said, "because I could not, because I have ruled every part of myself so long and so hard that I have forgotten how a man wants a thing out loud. So you will hear it now from me and not from him, so you will know past any doubt that it is true and not the beast being kind on my behalf." My voice was not steady. I let it not be steady. I had spent 30 years making it steady, and I was done. "I do not want the name from Ashcombe. I have never wanted her, nor any of the grave, clever women Ansel has carried to my table these 11 years, and I know now why. I watch for you at the kitchen door every morning, and it is not the hounds. It has never once been the hounds. I have known your step from the whole clatter of that kitchen since the spring, and I have stood in that doorway like a boy and told myself lies about hounds, and I am tired to the marrow of my bones of the lies. You are not a marvel to me, Nell. You are not a curiosity, nor a strange thing to be defended, nor a listener I want for the wonder of your ears. You are the first quiet I have known in 11 years of noise. When my wolf is loud and the council is loud and the whole cold North is loud in my head, you are the one still place, and I did not know I was drowning in the loudness until you were the quiet. I would have you beside me as my Luna, as my wife, as the still place, not because you hear my wolf, though God knows I have no secret left from you and find I do not want one, but because a half-drowned world is warmer with you in it, and I have been cold a very long time, and I am done being cold." She was crying, though she made no sound of it. She was too dignified for sound, my Nell, even then, even with her whole careful piece coming apart. The tears simply stood and fell, and she let them, and did not look away. "And if you do not want it," I said, and this was the hardest, harder than all the rest, and I made myself say it slow and clear so there could be no mistaking that I meant it. "If the great hall and the name and the staring lords and the whole cold weight of the north is more than you would ask of your one strange, hard-won life, then say so now, and I will not speak of it again, and I will not watch your doorway, and you may mind your low pots in peace to the end of your days. And I will find some way to bear it, because I have borne worse, and a king bears things. The road out is yours. It has to be yours, Nell, entirely yours, chosen in the full cold light of everything it costs, or it is worth nothing, and I will not have a thing between us that is worth nothing. That is the one gift I can give you that Ansel's true cold reckoning cannot touch. Not safety, I can't promise you safety. The hall will stare and some fool lord will sneer and I can't be everywhere. But the choice is yours and only yours and no one's else, for the first time in a life where 6 houses chose for you and turned you out. Choose, and whatever you choose, I will honor it on my crown." For a long moment she said nothing at all, and the frost came down, and the gray wolves watched from the wall without a sound, and my whole heart hung by a single thread over a long, dark drop. Then Nell, who had been turned out of 6 houses for being strange, who minded the low pots and sang the blind hound into eating, who had heard my truest and most unguarded heart in a wolf's voice for a whole season, and had never once, not one single time, used a word of it against me. Nell wiped her face with the heel of her flower-pale hand, that plain small gesture, and looked at me steady out of her weather eyes, and said, low and level and entirely and only her own, "Your wolf told me back in the autumn that you'd never in your life manage to say a word of that yourself." A breath. The ghost of the smile came out, at last, all the way out from where it had hidden for 6 turned-out houses, and it changed her whole plain face into something I would cross any ice for. "He was very sure of it. He said it like a man who'd given up hope." Another breath. "I'm glad he was wrong." "I am never wrong," said Bracken, softly, returning to the 2 of us at once, and I felt the sly warmth of him fill my chest to the brim. "I only ever said he'd never say it so that he'd finally try. 30 years I've waited to be proved wrong about that girl. Do you see now why I like you? You are the only thing in all his life that ever made him brave." And Nell laughed. It was the first time I ever heard her laugh out loud, a real laugh, surprised out of her, warm and low and utterly without guard. And standing there in the killing frost with my heart climbing back up out of the dark on that sound, I understood plainly and forever that I would arrange the whole rest of my reign, and my life, and my death if I could manage it, around the making of that sound. The harvest moot was 3 weeks on, and the whole of the north came up to Hyborough for it, as it does every year at the turning toward winter. The river lords and the moor lords and the far cold steadings, the banners and the beasts, the great hall lit end to end with every sconce and candle we owned, the long tables groaning under the last fat of the year. It is the one time the hold is full, the one time the whole north gathers under my roof to reckon the harvest and renew its oaths, and it is the one place a thing said is said before everyone and cannot be unsaid. Lady Syrian of Ashcombe came too, gracious and clever exactly as promised, 3 days' ride with her father's banner and her own grave good sense, and I will tell you what she did, because it is the true measure of her, and because I will not have her remembered wrongly as some cold rival in a tale. She was better than the tale needs her to be. I met her at the gate before the hall filled to tell her honestly, before she could be shamed by a public turning away, that I could not make the match, and why, and that the whole discourtesy of it was mine and none of hers, and that I would carry the fault to her father in whatever words she chose to give me, and take whatever cost the breaking asked. She heard me all the way out, standing straight in her travel cloak with the wind off the moor pulling at it. She did not interrupt. When I had finished, she was quiet a moment, looking past me at the gray pack ranged along the yard wall watching us both. "A listener," she said at last. "Truly, you are certain." When I said I was, she was quiet again, and then she said a thing I did not expect. "My grandmother told me of them when I was a girl small enough to sit on the hearthstone. The ones who hear the gray speech. She swore her own mother had known one, and everyone laughed at her for a fond old woman who'd got soft in the head, and she went to her grave laughed at. I have thought of that a great deal, writing here, since your steward's letter let slip more than he meant to." She looked back at me, and there was no anger in her, only something clear and rueful and a little bit fierce. "I have ridden 4 days to be jilted, my lord, and I find, to my own great surprise, that I do not mind it. I had made my peace with a good, sensible, loveless marriage to a cold northern king, because it was the match my house wanted, and I am a dutiful woman. But I find I would very much rather see a true listener made Luna of the North, the first in 3 generations, the thing my laughed-at grandmother swore was real, than be a sensible Luna myself. My house wanted a crown. It did not want your love, I never expected it, and you never offered it, and there's no wound here that needs tending, whatever the lords will whisper. She drew off her travel glove and put out her bare hand to me, plainly an ally and not a rival. So, present me to her, and do it inside in the full hall before all of them. I should like to be the very first great name in the North to bow to your listener, and I should like it to be seen to be on purpose, deliberate, chosen, so that every stiff old lord in that hall sees Ashcombe do it gladly and dares not, for the shame of it, do one whit less. And she did. When the hall was full, and the fires roaring and the whole North seated at the long tables, when Nell came in a good gray gown the color of her own weather eyes, that Mab had bullied a seamstress into cutting proper, still not quite believing the room she stood in. Mab 3 steps behind her fierce as a hen with 1 chick, and daring the world with her eyes. It was Lady Syrian of Ashcombe who rose first, before I had said a word, before all the assembled North. She rose in her fine travel-worn dignity and inclined her head, slow and deliberate and unmistakable, so the far tables could not fail to mark it, and said in a clear carrying voice, "The North is fortunate," and sat again, and let the whole staring hall reckon with the fact that the jilted lady of Ashcombe had bowed to the kitchen girl on purpose and with a straight glad back, and dared them, silently, to be smaller than she was. But I will tell you the truth. It was not the lady's bow that undid the hall, generous and clever as it was. It was Bracken. I had not planned it, and I could not have planned it, because you do not plan a wolf, and least of all mine. I rose to speak, to name her Luna before the North, to give the whole gathered country the plain words in my own voice that I had given her in the frozen yard, so that no man there could ever say the king had been spoken for by his beast. And I had said scarcely 3 words of it when the great gray pack that keeps at Highborough, that has run with my line since before the hold had a name, and has bowed its head to no living man in all that time, came in off the yard through the tall doors that no one had thought to bar against them, because who bars a door against his own wolves? 12 gray shapes flowed up the center of the great hall between the crowded tables, silent as smoke, and the river lords went white, and the moor lords half rose, and the fine hounds under the tables cowered flat, and the pack did not come to me. They went to her. They flowed to Nell where she stood, and they put their great heads against her hands one after another, the old gray bitch first, the one I had sat between as a boy, and then all the rest in their order, the whole ancient pack of the North gathering close around a foundling kitchen girl, and lowering their heads to her hands in the wolf's own way of kneeling. And in my chest, Bracken lifted his voice, and let the whole hall feel the force of it, though not one soul there but Nell could hear the words, and the words he said. Over and over ringing were, "This one. We choose this one. We have chosen her since the spring, since the drowned pup lived in her lap by the banked fire, and we do not choose twice, and we have never once in the long gray history of this line chosen wrong." And Nell stood in the very middle of it, in her weather-gray gown, with her plain hands full of the bowed heads of the wolves of the North, and tears standing bright in her eyes. And she looked up over all of them, down the whole lit roaring length of the hall, straight at me. "Your wolf," she said, unsteady, and the ghost smile broke all the way through the tears, "is showing off." "He is," I said. "He always does, Nell." And I said it then, the plain words in my own voice before all the gathered North, standing on my own 2 feet with nothing between us. "I choose you, not the wolf me. Torrin, who could not cross a kitchen for a season, chooses you with his own mouth before every lord in the North. Stand beside me. Be lunar of this cold house, if you will have a colder man who is trying to be warmer, and a wolf that will never learn to keep a secret, and a whole hall full of folk who owe you an apology and will spend a good while paying it." And Nell, just Nell, foundling of the moor holds, turned out of 6 houses for the crime of being a marvel no one troubled to know, minder of the low pots, singer to the blind hound, who had heard my most unguarded heart in a wolf's voice for a whole season, and had never once in all that time been anything but kind to what she heard. Nell stepped forward out of the ring of bowed gray heads, and crossed the whole lit length of the great hall herself, on her own 2 feet. Past every stiff, staring name in the North, and put her flower-pale hand into mine. "I'll have you," she said, low and level and entirely her own, for the whole hall and only for me. "And him," a breath, the smile steadying. But you should know what you're taking on, my lord, before the North hears you swear to it. He tells on you dreadfully. Every soft thing you'll ever try to hide from me, he'll have said aloud in your own chest before you've decided whether to. I will always know. There'll be no ruling your own face at me, not ever, not once, for the rest of our lives. I know, I said, and I found I was near to laughing and near to weeping and let myself be both in front of all of them and did not care. God help me, Nell, I know exactly. I have thought about very little else. And I find I would rather be known to the bone by you than ruled and guarded and safe and cold with anyone else in all the world. Let him tell on me. Let him tell on me every day of my life. I am done keeping secrets from the one still place I have. And the hall which had come up out of the whole North to reckon a harvest, and had got instead a listener and a bowing pack and a cold king cracked open like ice in spring, rose to it, Ashcombe first, on her feet again and glad of it, and then the river lords, and then even the stiff old moor lords, and then the whole roaring length of the great hall on its feet at once, and Mab wept openly and without shame into her good apron, and the drowned pup, grown and foolish, chose that exact moment to come bounding in after the pack and knock a whole platter to the flags, which set the front tables laughing, which broke the last of the awe into pure warm noise. And Ansel, dry old Ansel, who had brought me a woman a year for 11 years and grieved each refusal, came and stood at my shoulder in the din, and looked a long moment at Nell with the wolves settling around her skirts, and said, gruff and low, only to me, well, I did say she should be able to stand in the great hall and not be swallowed by the room. A pause, the nearest thing to warmth I ever heard from him. I did not, I confess, account for her bringing the pack in with her. That does rather settle the matter of whether the North will kneel to her. Another pause, and then, quieter still, the true thing under the dry thing. Your father would have liked her, my lord. He never had any use for grave, clever women either. He married your mother for her laugh. I had forgot that until just now. And he cleared his throat and straightened, and that was as near to an apology and a blessing both as Ansel ever came in his long, flinty life. And I took it whole, and gripped his narrow shoulder, and we were easy with each other again, and stayed so to the end of his days. We were wed at the turning of the year, in the small hearth chapel and not the great hall, because Nell asked for small, and a king who has learned anything at all has learned to give his Luna the small things she asks for, and to give them gladly, and to count it his good fortune to be asked. Mab cooked, and would let no one else near the fires, and cried the whole while, and threatened salt in the porridge of anyone who remarked on it. The pack lay along the chapel wall through the whole of it, gray and grave and utterly at their ease, as though a wolf at a wedding were the most ordinary thing in the world, which at Highborough it now was. Ansel stood as my witness and read the old words in his dry, precise voice, and did not once, that I saw, allow himself to weep, though his voice went strange on the line about the house made whole. Lady Syrian did not stay for it. She had ridden home to Ashcombe well content, but she sent by a fast rider a single book, the rarest in her father's whole library, with a note that said only, for the Luna of the North, who I am told reads slowly and well, teach her king to sit still long enough to be read to. See. And Nell laughed at that, and has read to me by the winter fire on 10,000 nights since, slowly and well, and I have learned at last and for her to sit still. I am an old man now, or near enough that the difference does not signify. I am telling you all of this by the hearth in the low, warm room she has always loved better than any throne room, with the gray pack, their grandchildren now and their grandchildren's grandchildren, but the same gray pack asleep across the door, and her mending in her lap, her hands still good, still the best hands in the North. The country remembers her differently than it remembers me, and rightly. They will remember me, when I am gone, as the king who held the Kelder border and kept the North whole through hard winters, which is a fair thing and enough for any man. But her they remember warmer. They remember the Luna who could hear the wolves, who in 40 years never once let a hound go hungry, or a stranger go turned away, or a strange child go called a fool, who took a cold, guarded hold and made it a place where a body could be as odd as it pleased so long as the barley didn't catch, exactly as Mab once made her one small kitchen for a turned-out girl. The more holds send their listener-touched children to her now, the strange ones no one else will keep, and she keeps every one, and not one has ever been turned out of Highborough, not in 40 years, and there is a whole grown generation of the ones turned-out serving up and down the North who would walk into the sea for her. She is the better of the two of us by a long gray road, and I have never once minded saying so, and I say it still to any who'll hear it, and to plenty who'd rather not. But here is what I will keep, when the rest of it goes, as it is beginning to go, when the moots blur and the borders fade, and even the great night in the hall with the pack comes loose in my memory like a sail from its mast. Not the crown. Not the moot, nor the bowing wolves, nor even the plain hard-won words in the killing frost of that yard, dear as they are. This. Every single morning still, after 40 years, my wolf tells on me. He is old now, as I am, grayed and slow and content, but he has lost not one thread of his lifelong gift for saying aloud the tender things I still, even now, even after everything, cannot quite get past my own teeth. Tell her the frost came hard in the night, and you rose in the dark to lay another log and covered her feet before you climbed back in. He'll murmur, thinking himself sly, as though I have not caught him at exactly this 10,000 mornings running. Tell her you lay awake a while and watched her sleeping, and thought the same fool-grateful thought you have thought every dawn for 40 years. And before I have crossed the room, before I have got a single one of the words up and out into the air, Nell will look up from her mending, with the ghost of that same caught smile she used to hide from a whole cruel world, weather-gray eyes gone soft and old and still entirely her own, and she will say, quiet and level and warm, "I heard, you know." She always hears, she has always heard. From the very first gray morning she dropped a ladle in my kitchen and pretended she had not, to this hearth and this hour. She has heard every unguarded thing in me before I could decide whether to keep it, and has met every one of them with kindness, and has never once, in 40 years, used a single one against me. And I have stopped at last, and entirely and forever pretending it is the hound's.